Welcome back, friends. I'm so happy to be here with you for another episode of What's on Your Plate podcast. I'm Sarah, your host. I know it's been a minute, and I thank you for your patience while I took a much needed break to reflect and regroup. I'm so happy to be back here, and today's episode is a really important one that I know will resonate with a lot of you. The complicated relationship with food can mean different things for different people. But most of us have struggled with emotions surrounding food at some point in time. A bit of a spoiler alert for you. It's not really about the food. Listen in to this vulnerable and brave discussion that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Here we go. I am really excited today to be here with Jane Pilger. She empowers women who feel out of control around food to develop food freedom and body trust. Being somebody who has struggled with food binging herself, she helps women who have been struggling, often for decades, to find the missing link to go from fighting with their bodies to working with them. Welcome, Jane. I am really excited for this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I am excited to be here and I'm just looking forward to seeing where the conversation goes and how really, my goal is just to bring some insight, some awareness, and maybe a little bit of even some relief, some understanding to your listeners, to anybody who struggles with food, has a complicated relationship with food, whether binge eating is your thing or not, like if you've got a complicated relationship with food, there will be something in this episode for you. So really that's my goal, is to bring some awareness, some insight, some aha, I never thought about it that way, something like that. That's really what I'm hoping to bring to your audience today.
Well, I'm sure that's going to be the case. This is a topic that really doesn't get talked about enough. There's a lot of awareness, I feel like, in society of eating disorders or struggles with eating, complicated eating, something that each and every one of us need to do to sustain life, has really become a very heavy type of topic oftentimes. And one that there's often a lot of shame or guilt or other complicated feelings surrounding. And it's not discussed in an open space or a safe space nearly as much as it should be. And I'm so just happy that you are somebody that can elevate this topic and share, for one thing, why this became an important topic for you and how it really needs to be something that is much more prevalent in terms of talking about day in and day out. So take us back a little bit. I mean, why is this something that is even on your heart to put out into the world?
Yeah, I will absolutely answer that. And I also want to address what you just said, because really the answer was in the statement, which is the reason why people aren't talking about this more is because there's so much shame and there's so much judgment. And there's this idea and this thought of like, oh my gosh, there's no way that I could let anybody know what I'm doing or what I'm, how I'm eating in secret or behind closed doors. And because there is this like, no way, no way, no way, then we don't talk about it. But what I have come to find, and I will absolutely tell you my story to kind of go into that, but what I've come to find is the more I open up and the more I talk about my own experiences and my own story, the more other people are like, oh, I'm not alone. Oh, me too. Oh, I didn't even know that other people did struggle with that, or that it would be safe or okay for me to talk about it. So for me, it's like the more I talk about it, the more it either gives the person who's not yet ready to talk a little bit of, okay, I'm not alone. And that person who maybe is ready to start talking about it, oh, I can talk to her because she gets it. She understands. She's been there. So for me, to kind of back up the story, at this time of year, we're actually recording today, it's Halloween, and this time of year is so it's really very impactful for me because my very first binge was in October. It was probably mid to late October of my freshman year of college. And I was in a dorm room. I was in a dorm room by myself. I received a care package and it was full of candy bars, little mini miniature fun size, whatever, candy bars. And it was intended as a, kind of, here's this gift for you kind of during midterm time. And we're thinking about you. And I don't remember the binge itself, but what I do remember is the aftermath. I can remember sitting on the floor in my dorm room, that empty box in front of me, and just empty candy bar wrappers just strewn all around me. And I could not believe that I had eaten the whole box. I did not know what had happened, but I felt so ashamed. And so I really thought, like, what is wrong with me? What did I just do? Oh my gosh, I felt very broken. And from there, I went on to try to figure out, how do I stop? How do I not do this again? But I was so terrified, I couldn't tell anybody. I was very much, for a long time, very concerned about my image, my appearance. I wanted everybody to think that I had everything all together and under control. And I felt so out of control in this area. And so because of that, I was like, no, I can't let anybody see this out of control part, because I had so carefully crafted and curated this appearance of somebody who was very much in control. And so this feeling of being out of control around food was like, it was very it just didn't it was dissonance to like who I wanted to be in this world. And so I was trying to do these things and I was trying to stop binging, but what I didn't realize is the very things I was trying to do to stop were actually keeping me in the pattern. But because I wouldn't talk to anybody about it, I was trying to figure it out on my own. This was well before, I mean, the internet was just barely starting to even be a thing. So we didn't have the resources, kind of that are available now. But that's really how it started for me.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. A lot to sort of sift through when you are sitting in a very vulnerable space like you were and feeling that inner guilt and shame, and then worrying about who will find out, and also, how do I fix this? There's
Yes.
so many layers of things there to try to navigate on your own. And the stigmas of even being able to tell somebody, being
Mm,
able to ask for help. I feel like the world has come a bit farther since then in terms of what is available for all types of help, but it's still something that isn't screamed from the rooftops most of the time. And people do feel incredibly alone. Why do you think it is that we fear being viewed as out of control so much?
I think for me, like it was for me anyway, I always wanted to appear strong, appear like I had the answers, appear like I had it together. And so when I felt like I was out of control, I felt very weak. I felt like I didn't have the answers. I thought that people would see me negatively, I was seeing myself as a failure. And so I was just sure that other people, if anybody knew, they would have the same kind of judgment, the contempt, the you should know better, that type of thing. So I think it was kind of that fear of rejection, that kind of very natural human fear, really.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense because we
yeah,
are we are not conditioned to believe that we should be coming off to anybody as being weak or
right.
incapable, or yeah. Um, what I really love about what you're doing, Jane, is you are not approaching people with how to better, food prep for the week, or take something out of their diet or add something to their diet. You know, you are approaching this very real topic by acknowledging that it really has nothing to do with the food itself. And
Yes.
I love that. Can you please explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, you know, it's so interesting. I was talking to a client the other day. This is a new client the other day, and she was talking about how so many other approaches say just give yourself unlimited access to food. Just eat all the food as much as you want, however much you want, and then ultimately eventually you'll get tired of it and then you won't want to eat those things anymore. And then there's another approach that's like take all these foods out of your diet. If you eliminate this and you eliminate this and you eliminate this and you only eat in these number of hours of the day, then then you won't want to binge anymore. And I'm like, I don't buy into either of those. Those both leave you on a pendulum and they both leave you feeling terrible physically and emotionally. And at the
Not to
same time,
mention confused, right?
yes,
Really confused
yes.
on which is the right way.
Right, exactly. The other message that a lot of people who struggle with food, particularly with binge eating, the other message that is constantly given is you will always struggle with this. This will always be a problem. You will never really get over it. You will never really recover. This is kind of your cross to bear. You have to do these things, for the rest of your life. And I don't buy that either. Now, I also am not here to say this is a quick fix. This goes away overnight. I'm also not here to say that like I never, ever, ever struggle with food because that is not the truth. But I was actually thinking about it this morning. This morning, I was imagining what did I used to think food freedom would look like? And I had this very perfectionistic view that I would never have another desire to, eat food for I don't know, in reaction to an emotion or wanting to avoid something. Like I would just never have those thoughts ever again. And that's not my current reality. Doesn't mean it might not happen in the future, but what I do have right now is I would say 95% of my life is I have so much peace around food. I feel very calm, very connected, very confident around food. And now when I don't, when food starts to become a little more, it take up a little more space in my brain, um, it's a warning sign. I like to think of it as a light on the dashboard. It tells me there's something else going on here. So it's not the food itself isn't the problem. The food is the symptom. It tells us there's something going on under the hood. There's one of a number of things that are probably happening that in response to those things happening, the food becomes the light goes on. And so if we can start looking at what's happening under the hood, instead of focusing on the food, what should I eat? What shouldn't I eat? When should I eat? How should I eat? How many of this should I eat? None of that, like it matters, but it doesn't. I'm not here to say that what you eat in a day doesn't make a difference to how you feel and how your body responds. It does, but that's not the solution. The solution is to look under the hood. What's causing these responses and us to eat in this way that doesn't feel like, I don't really like this doesn't feel like a way that I want to eat. It doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel kind of like connected. Then that's your warning light. Then we can look under the hood.
That makes so much sense. I feel as though anything that we do in excess, anything that becomes an addiction, something like food or alcohol or drugs or even binging Netflix or anything like that, you are ignoring something under the surface,
Yeah.
trying to numb something.
Yeah, I like to think of it. I don't. I don't really resonate with the word addiction because there's just so much around it. And I mean, we could have a big conversation about that. But the way that I like to say it, that I feel like resonates no matter what your perspective is anytime you're showing up in a way that you would rather not, in a way that just doesn't line up with the way you would like to be showing up, there's something else going on. It's not you know better, you should do better, you're broken, there's something wrong with you. It's not any of that. There really is something else going on underneath that's creating that result that you see in your life that you're like, oh, I would really rather not be doing that or showing up in that way or responding in that way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me too. And also something you said a little bit earlier, how much space it's taking up in your mind. Anytime you are just fully consumed and your thoughts just constantly revolve around something that is very stressful for you or very all consuming for you, that to
Yes.
me is a sign as well that there's something unhealthy going on with whatever that relationship is, whether it is
Yes.
food or whether it is exercise or some other just fixation that you can't seem to get a good handle on.
Yes. And I would say that is one of the biggest complaints that I hear is so much of my time and my day and my mental energy is focused on food, whether it's what I'm going to eat, when do I get to eat, what I have eaten, all of that. And there's the problem. I mean, there's a lot of problems with it, but when there's that much of our mental capacity and our mental space being taken up by food, there's just not a lot of room for other things. And so we've got these other things in life we would love to be doing or we would love to be pursuing, but there's just that literally there's not the space or even the mental energy or capacity to go after and to pursue those things.
For sure. And I think for me, the space mentally that something like food can take up is the reason that things like calorie counting or macro counting or, carb to portion to protein ratios and things like that has never been something I've been able to subscribe to because it becomes so involved and it becomes something that just feels like an absolute chore. And I have never felt like food should be a chore.
Yes. Yes, totally agree. And all of that sets you up for a right wrong mentality.
Mhm.
Or I'm either on plan, I am on target for my calories or my macros or my whatever I'm trying to follow, or I'm off plan. And a lot of people, particularly people who struggle with binge eating, really um, can fall into that all or nothing, that good and bad mentality. So if I'm off, if I have now, like, if I was going to eat perfectly and I was going to have no sugar, no dessert, no whatever today, and I ended up having some, then now I might as well, because I'm going to be good tomorrow. I'm not going to be eating any of this stuff tomorrow. So I might as well just get it all out of my system. I might as well eat it all now. And we get on this, we're on the all or nothing. I'm either in this was me. I am either eating perfectly, like, people would say, oh, they would look at me and they would watch what I was eating, like in the break room or, what I would order. And they'd be like, wow, you're so disciplined. I can't believe, you eat that way. Yet little did they know I was then driving to the convenience store, the bakery, eating all of this stuff in my car, driving around town, literally like I would I would pull up if I was eating in my car. This during college, I ate in my dorm room. Then, during a long period of time, I would primarily binge in my car. And so I would drive around, I would stop at a convenience store, and I would only buy like two things at a time. I would go to a bakery, I might buy two things at a time. I would never buy a large amount of food in any one place so that nobody would know I was going to adjust how much food I was eating. But even when I went into the convenience store, when I went into the bakery, um, I was very aware of my surroundings. I didn't want anybody to see me. When I would be driving, if I pulled up to somebody at a light, I would park my car, like not park, but I would stop very what's the word I'm looking for? Strategically, so that the person in the car next to me, like I might be a little bit in their blind spot. So I would stop a little bit ahead of them or a little bit behind them, not so that I would be right next to them if they looked over to kind of see what I was doing. So I was very, and I was just sure that people were like watching me and were looking and were judging. And it's just so interesting to think about how much, even while I was in a binge, how much I was really thinking about. There were a lot of ways I wasn't thinking at all, but then there were other ways where I was very much just thinking I didn't want anybody else to know. I didn't want anybody else to see me.
That is really something that I think a lot of people will resonate with in terms
Yeah.
of like Me Too type of mentality.
Yeah.
Um, and the way that our society puts so much shame and blame and guilt on what we eat and what that might mean for a body image is so toxic. And also the way that we glamorize healthy eating, what is quote unquote
Yes.
healthy eating too, like if you are somebody that really has your internal cup filled with affirmation type of connection and you are, eating something seemingly in that health spectrum of food and somebody notices and maybe they say, oh, that's, looks like a really healthy salad, or oh, that looks like that's, far healthier than what I'm eating today, or any kind of comment like that that feels like you're doing something good or right,
Yes.
so to
Yes.
speak. And then when you don't, I
Yes.
think that that is something that a lot of people would choose to hide
Yes.
because then it isn't accepted. Then it might be something that they think is going to be the opposite of those feel good affirmations. And people want to feel good. They want to
Yes.
feel like, they're receiving those high fives or those compliments. And when they go the opposite direction, that can really feel um, isolating,
Yes. Yes.
lonely, right? It's just amazing how much we as humans are influenced by what is outside of us.
Yeah. And well, it what were two things come up for me as you're saying this. Number one is thinking back to what we were saying before about that fear of what other people will think, right? Like the mentality where we want to be approved, we want to be considered to be a part of it. And because the approval comes in so many ways, in eating healthy, in your body size getting smaller, that's where approval comes. Then if we're not getting that, or we're afraid we're going to get the opposite, then we do want to hide that because we think we'll be rejected. And the
Mhm.
other part of that, which goes right along with all of it, is the number of clients I have, and I experienced this myself, who receive compliments when their eating really is at like the height of restriction, of more like, for
Mm.
me, when I was at the height of my restricted eating, when I was probably at the least healthy mentally and physically weight for myself, I received the most compliments. And so you have these people, they start getting compliments and they're like, ooh, I want more of those. I want to keep doing it. And then it kind of, that kind of perpetuates. And then they want more and more compliments. So they keep kind of going more extreme in the behavior. But it's like like the people who are giving the compliments have no idea they're actually reinforcing patterns of eating that are not physically or mentally healthy or even sustainable. But if those are the only positive feedback and compliments they're getting, it's no wonder that this all feels so complicated. Like, I don't even know what to do with that. I'm getting these messages from the outside and from, the media and from all of these other places. And then I'm trying to do these things and I see this on Instagram and I get these messages that, all of this is happening, and it all just feels like so not what I'm experiencing inside, but nobody talks about like what's actually happening.
Right. Yeah, nobody does talk about that part of it.
No, the other thing that is fascinating that I don't think, I mean, I think very few people know, so many people in this space of people who are talking about food and have their own food challenges. We got into this space because we have either have or have had challenges with food. So many people who are still in this space do still have challenges and still have struggles with food, which makes sense. Again, it's not like this just turns off and never, ever, ever shows up again. But the amount of women, not only women, I mostly hear about women, but the amount of people who are in the space of helping others with food and with their bodies and with all of this stuff who are silently struggling because that's its own challenge, right? Like here I am helping other people. I've got my own challenges. What do I do? Who do I talk to? Because I can't really tell everybody else. All my people think I'm perfect and I don't ever struggle again. So then it becomes this very, again, complicated thing, which is part of why and I mean, I went through this myself when I first started coaching and I first started doing all of this when I started my business and I started actually talking about my story, my eating and my binging escalated. And I was like, whoa, I thought I had this figured out. And like, here it is. And I felt very like incongruous. Like, who am I to be talking about this? And here I am, like in secret, still struggling. And so I decided at some point, I was like, I am just not going to pretend that I am one of these people who never, ever, ever has problems again. And that this is like all in the rearview mirror and that I'm perfect. Like, I'm just not going to do that. And so what's been amazing is when it doesn't happen very often, but it happens sometimes. And when it does, I'm now like, I have my own process, my own thing. I tell my clients about it. I'm like, hey, here's what happened. Here's my process. I'm going to tell you exactly all of it. And like, what's been so cool is my clients are like, wow, it is so helpful for me to see number one, that you are a human too. Number
Mhm.
two, to watch you go through these things you tell us and to watch you go through this process. And I literally, like, again, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, I mean, I can pretty much process, make sense of it, learn the lesson, move on really quickly now, but it didn't always used to be that way. But it's actually fun for me. Like the process of having a struggle isn't fun, but it is fun for me to be like, how am I going to not only work on this and learn from this for myself, but how can I use this as like so much value that my clients can then be like, oh, I can actually see this in action. And it's really, I had I had a situation where this happened and I had a client say, "Oh my gosh, to hear you say, nope, didn't use that tool. Like I know that tool's there, didn't even think about it. Nope, didn't even use it." They were like, "Oh, even you don't know." I'm like, "No, I don't." And so it was fun. Like it wasn't fun in the moment, but it was really neat. It was like rewarding to watch them get a little relief of like, "Oh, okay, I really don't have to be perfect to kind of work through this." And at the end of the day, do I still feel very peaceful and calm and connected around food? Yes, totally.
I love that so much. The way that you have come through your journey and developed and leaned into these tools, as you call them, I would love to hear you talk more about what we discussed earlier, those 8 reasons why
Yeah,
we binge. And
yeah.
awareness is the first thing, right? Like
Mhm.
being aware and understanding the why something is happening. And from there, being able to navigate how to utilize the tools.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, that's exactly right. I say so often awareness is the first step to change. And what I love is that awareness is like, we can't just stop at awareness, but awareness alone can be very relieving. If it's like, oh, that makes sense. I can see it. Now, I still need to do something to change it, but just to be able to see what you haven't been able to see before is huge. Then we can go
Mhm.
from there. Now what? Right. So yes, 8 reasons why, and then each reason has their own solution. So I'm going to go through the reasons first, and then we can kind of just talk about the solutions also. But the number one reason, we actually talked about it in the very beginning, it's shame and judgment. So the way that I like to think about it, we talked about the binges being the lights on the dashboard. And I talk specifically about binge eating, but if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't really binge, but I'm really kind of like, I'm resonating with a lot of what you're saying, just put in your, like, when you eat in a way that you don't like, when you kind of feel out of control around food, just put that, like you're kind of eating in this, like, ooh, I don't really like that. That is your light on the dashboard.
For sure, because I just want to highlight something that we said before you move on, in that just because you might not have an official diagnosis of an actual eating disorder does not mean that you don't either struggle with food or have a complicated relationship with it. So truly,
Yes.
going back to what you said in the very beginning, there is something for everybody in this conversation. Please
Yeah.
proceed.
Yeah, totally. So our lights on the dashboard are like our food struggle, our food challenge, right? We have a challenge with food, light on the dashboard. So what we want to do, look under the hood. Now, shame and judgment are the 50-pound weight that goes on top of the hood of the car. And if that shame and judgment is there, we can't even get under the hood to see what's causing those lights to come on in the first place. So that is the number one reason. Number two is restriction. So there's two types of restriction: physical restriction and mental restriction. Physical restriction is just like it sounds, like eliminating food groups, trying to only eat during certain hours of the day, eliminate, like trying to eat less, like small amounts of food, physical restriction. Mental restriction is the type of restriction that's like, it's mental. It's like, I'm not, like, I'm only going to eat 2 bites. I'm not going to eat this today, or I'm not going to, it's like the mental, like the things that we kind of are planning in our minds to restrict or to not eat very much, or that type of thing. Reason number three, a dysregulated nervous system. The nervous system work for me was a huge missing piece. I didn't really talk about this in my story. I talked about, my very first binge that first semester in college. I went on to struggle for 25 years. I am a very driven person. I'm very committed. I was, on this, like, I am going to figure this out. And I pretty much said, if I ever figure this out, I'm going to help other people do the same. I went through 2 rounds of intensive outpatient treatment at an local eating disorders treatment center, podcasts, books, programs, you name it. I did all of the things. And the learning about the nervous system and really kind of creating safety with myself, safety with my body, safety with food, was literally, I think, the missing piece. Safety and trust, kind of like those two pieces all combined with the nervous system. So that's reason number three. Reason number four is disconnection from the body. A lot of people who struggle with food are not very connected with their body, with the physical signals, and really just disconnecting in general. Reason number five, coping mechanism. But we don't, with this also was for sure me. We didn't do emotions in my house growing up. We never said, I love you. When we got upset with each other, we literally would leave. I would go to my room and slam the door. The next morning we would come out and we never talked about it. It was just like under the rug. And so did not learn how to do emotions. So then it makes sense, right? If we go to college, if we kind of look back now to college, and number one, I had been on a very restrictive diet for over a year before I went to college. And then here I am. I have all of these big emotions. I'm away from my family and my friends and all these people. I don't really know what to do with the emotions. then it's like, oh, it all kind of starts to make sense as to why that all happened. Now, it took me a long time to be able to look back and make sense of it, but so coping mechanism, reason number 5. Reason number 6 is an attempt to control. We kind of have touched on this a little bit, right? We're trying to control, I really wanted to control my body. I wanted to control the size and the shape of it. I wanted to control what other people thought of me, all of that. Number 7 is habit. Now, here's what's interesting about habit. Yes, when we do something repeatedly, it absolutely does become a habit. Our brain likes to be efficient, likes to, turn things kind of automatically to use less energy. But so many people approach binge eating. Here's what's interesting to me. People approach binge eating from one of two places, either from the food side or from a habit side, or some combination of the two. And there can absolutely be a habitual component, especially if this is something you've been doing for a long time. But if we only approach it from a habit-based perspective, we're not addressing the other 7 reasons. And so it's never going to stick. So if you have tried to read a book like Atomic Habits and then apply it to your food stuff, and you've got any one of these other reasons going on, there's a reason that these just straight up habit-based things don't work. And yes, it can be, a habit can be a part of it. We just have to look at all of the reasons. And then lastly, reason number 8 is negative self-talk. It's the way you talk to yourself inside your head, which a lot of people aren't really even aware of what happens up there and what it sounds like. But if you think about this, when somebody says something mean to you, somebody says something like judgmental or kind of snarky or whatever to you or about you, what do you want to do? For me, I want to get as far away from them as possible. So the same thing happens for ourselves. If we're saying these mean, awful things to ourselves inside our head, what do we want to do? Get away. Well, how have we figured out how to get away? For some of us, for me, for sure, binge eating was a way that I used to say it as I would just turn the lights off on myself. I would just be like, okay, I'm binging. I have this ability to turn it off, kind of turn off awareness, turn off the connection to my body, turn off the emotions, turn off anything that's happening here. And again, in that hindsight, I realized, oh, I'm slamming the door on myself. Just like I used to go slam the door in high school, the way that I slam the door now, because I've got to kind of do it on myself, is through the binge. So then it's okay. So those are the 8 reasons. Now we can go to the solutions. Each reason has a solution. So I'll just tell you very quickly what they are. So reason number 1 was shame and judgment. So the solution number 1 is to understand why you started and why it's still happening in the first place. And a lot of it is literally just looking at this. So if you're listening to this, it's very possible you resonate with all 8 of these. And if you do, you are not alone. Most people do in some way resonate with most or all of them. But just understanding oh, I get it. I can start to make sense of it. So just like I can see, oh, look at that. Yep, I had restriction before I went into college. Yeah, I didn't even know about a nervous system. So yeah, it was definitely dysregulated. I was definitely disconnected. I was trying to control. I had no ability to feel my emotions. Once I started doing it and I kept doing it, yep, it got into a habit and I for sure was speaking negatively to myself. Oh, yeah, okay, so it makes sense why I'm in this cycle. Totally makes sense. So that's solution number 1, just understanding, which you're already on your way to just by listening to this podcast, which is pretty cool. So number 2, the reason was restriction, and the solution is to remove restrictions. Now there can be a lot, that's a whole nother conversation, but the solution is to remove restrictions. Number 3 is a dysregulated nervous system. So the solution is to work with your nervous system, learn about your nervous system. There's so much beautiful work that can be done with your nervous system and food, which what's cool about the nervous system work is it goes into every single aspect of your life. Number 4, the reason was disconnection from your body. And so the solution is to connect with your body, to learn how to connect to not just be, for me, I was just in my head all the time, thinking, planning, doing, achieving, all everything up here. And so you learn to tune in and to connect with your body and really kind of develop this trust, this relationship where your body actually is always communicating with you and like opening up to what it's saying. Number five, the reason was a coping mechanism. So the solution is to expand your emotional capacity. That's what I call your ability, your capacity to be with any emotion. So many of us are like, ew, that emotion, like for lots of different reasons, emotions might feel dangerous. They might feel like too big or too much, or like if I let myself go there, I'll never stop. So there's a skill that most of us, particularly those of us, in an older, over 40 plus age group, we didn't learn emotions. Like that was just not part of any sort of curriculum. So it's a skill that we just literally never learned. So that's solution number five. Number six, the reason was an attempt to control. And so the solution here is to develop what I call two-way trust. So two-way trust is trust between you and your body. And it means that you trust that your body is going to communicate with you. It's going to tell you what it needs, what's going on. Hey, I'm hungry. Hey, I've had enough to eat. Hey, I'm tired. I'm thirsty, whatever it is. And your body trusts that when it communicates with you, you are going to respond. How many of us have spent years, decades learning how to override the signals of our body? Yeah, I'm hungry. I've been hungry for hours, but I'm out of points, or I'm not supposed to eat during these hours of the day, or I've got this big party tonight, so I'm not going to eat until I get there. Whatever it is, right? We've like trained ourselves to override our signals. If I just drink enough coffee in the morning, then I don't have to eat actual food until lunch. And then we convince ourselves, well, my body, I'm just not hungry until lunch. I'm not a breakfast eater. I might challenge that. So that two-way trust. Number seven is habit. So solution, break the habit. Again, simple on its own, but we're looking at the whole picture. And then number eight is the negative self-talk. And so the solution there is to change the internal dialogue. And I like to think about your self-talk as like it's a radio station. It's kind of the channel, like the it's what you hear. It's just what's in the background all the time, over and over again. And so with practice and with awareness and with intention, we can change the station that's happening in our mind. And the more we do that and the gentler and softer that internal language comes, then I have less reason to feel this need to get away from myself, because in my inside world becomes just a kinder, gentler place to live.
That was an abundance of information. And as you were describing it all, so much came up for me in terms of different points in my life where a lot of those reasons and solutions have happened, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And I love that you said in the beginning of that description that you can probably count on connecting with a lot of, if not all of those reasons,
Yeah.
because it isn't any one thing. One of the things that I think about a lot is the way that we unintentionally influence youth.
Mm.
And my grandmothers both influenced the way I thought about food.
Mm.
And they didn't do it with any intention of wanting me to be somebody that developed issues with food. But I can remember one of my grandmothers just being a chronic dieter
Yeah.
and having all of these trendy diets rotating through her life constantly, everything from only eating beets to Atkins to you name it. Like she tried just like the most ridiculous of things sometimes it seemed, the most extreme things, in such a desperation to just control what she was eating and to lose
Yeah.
weight. And I internalized that. And
Mm,
the other grandmother would actually say things directly like, too much butter will make your butt too big, type of thing.
mm,
Or I can remember another instance where there was criticism over how many donuts were being eaten.
yeah,
And those things, like those memories, absolutely form our thoughts
yes,
as kids, and we manifest them into adulthood. And it takes a toll, because those earliest influences on just anything in life, but for sure as it pertains to this conversation of food, um, it has such an impact, and then everything else around us will contribute to just the compounding of those types of things, which goes right into how we talk to ourselves internally and what we tell ourselves when we are having an extra piece of something, or whether we are, choosing something that seems indulgent over not. And just that way we disconnect with ourselves or
yes,
allow ourselves to be uncomfortable because we feel like maybe we've had something we shouldn't. it
yes.
is it is a deep, deep tunnel of emotion and feeling. And I know that a lot of what you shared is absolutely superficial. When you are working with your clients and people that come to you for help, these are things that you really pick apart in depth. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, basically it depends on if I work with clients really in two different ways. So I have a group coaching program, and then I have a one-on-one practice. So when I'm working one-on-one with a client, really what we do is we end up covering, all of the areas. And, I've got so many just huge library of resources that I'll say, oh, you got to go check this out, or check out this teaching, or check this out here. But so much of what I love to do is say, okay, here's how this is showing up in your life. Here's how, like, I help them kind of see and make sense of it. And then between now and the next time we talk, here's what I want you to do and what I want you to work on and what I want you to think about. So I don't really love to kind of give people like all this extra work and homework and whatever. It's really, let's take whatever's coming up real and true for you now, and then we put it into practice. Here's things that you can work on. Here's things to just, again, that awareness is always the first step. Starting to become aware of, oh, and it's always amazing how it's like, wow, just starting to see this in a different way makes everything different. So, some other people, I think another kind of myth that comes along with binge eating, like in overcoming binge eating, is it's going to be so much work, it's going to take so much time. And I really don't find that that's actually the case. It doesn't take time. What it takes is connection, it takes intention, it takes awareness. So it takes a willingness to stay with yourself. But if we go back to shame and judgment, if I can, and again, we don't just, like, you don't go to the gym and just lift up the 50-pound weight, right? It's not like, oh, we'll just throw that over there and no more shame and judgment, yay. Like, it's not that easy. But if we can shift away from shame and judgment, and now I can be into curiosity and like, oh wow, okay, yeah, I can actually see that. Oh, if I'm not thinking that I'm broken and I should have this figured out and I'll never figure this out, but I'm thinking, oh, I never saw that before. Oh, yeah, I can see how when I was thinking about it that way or looking at it that way, yeah, that definitely led to that result with food. And then we start to have these moments where we have a different response and we have a different reaction and we show up with food in a different way and we're able to, not binge or whatever it is. Then we start gaining all of this evidence of like, oh, I can do this. Oh, yeah. And then it kind of like builds in momentum from there.
Yeah, that really makes a lot of sense for sure.
Yeah.
One thing I would like you to share a little bit more on, that I think is maybe one of the one of the reasons and solutions that is not as clear cut for people, and I know you said that it's been important for you, is that understanding of your nervous system. Can
Yeah.
you give us a little bit more insight of what that actually means?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I will give you a very brief, kind of like a just like a super brief overview of the nervous system. And then I actually have a podcast episode that goes a little bit more into this. So if you, I'll give you the link if you want to,
Yes.
kind of include that. Then if somebody wants to kind of get more, you can go listen to that podcast episode about it. But essentially, I like to teach the nervous system in a very simple, easy way to understand. And essentially, it's this: our nervous system, we generally have three states in our nervous system. So we have what's called, I call it home base. Some people might call it the window of tolerance. Some people call it just like your grounded, connected space. In this space, you and I are both in home base right now. We're able to connect. We're able to have a conversation. We're able to use our logical brains to kind of engage and be productive. We're able to have this conversation. We're able to make progress towards our goals. Now, the two other states are what I call, again, I do this in a very simple way, above home base and below home base. And you know you're above or below based on the amount of energy you feel in your body. So when we have a lot of excess energy in our body, this is when we're above home base. Some people might know this as fight or flight. So we're like either this common emotions there are fear, worry, anxiety, overwhelm, anger, frustration. There's a lot of energy there. When I'm below home base, there's a low amount of energy. People might know this as freeze, shutdown. I might common feelings there are depressed, hopeless, lethargic, like just very low energy. So you might be unable to get off the couch, unable to, like, you might just be scrolling. You know you've got a lot to do, but you like literally cannot get yourself to do it. In when you're above home base, it kind of there's all this energy, and you're just like I've got to either do something, or I'm really angry, or I might say something to my partner or my kids or something like that. Now, so you can kind of start to just recognize in yourself, we all have all three states for a lot of different reasons, which we won't even go into, but for a lot of different reasons, each one of us has our own kind of preferred state, the place where we spend the most amount of time. So I like to think of it like a thermostat. So, some people prefer hanging out in a room that's 72 degrees. Some people like hanging out in a room that's 67 degrees. There's no right or wrong. It's just based on a lot of reasons. This is kind of this is where I spend more time. So some people may resonate. I spent a lot of time above home base, constantly go, 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 do. I've always like too much to do, not enough time, like go, go, go. Spent very little time in home base where I'm just relaxed and I'm connected and I'm, kind of just there. Some people spend more time below where they're just checked out. They're more like not actually doing or taking action. Here's how food comes into the mix. If you're above home base and you've got a lot of excess energy here, what we figure out pretty wisely is that food can help us drain the energy. When we're above home base, like home base is the place to rest and digest. It's where our body feels best. It's where we feel best. We kind of, not all of us feel best there, quite honestly, but it's a place where the body wants to be, and it can heal and be in its kind of natural state. Both above and below home base are survival states. It is the brain and the nervous system perceiving there is a threat here. And based on the level of threat, it's going to be in one or the other. So if I've got a lot of energy here, the solution is I need to drain the energy. I got to come back down. So we kind of wisely figure out, oh, you know what? Food actually helps me drain the energy. And it does. But for a lot of people, if you eat a lot of food, what can happen is I would be up here, I would start eating. Then I eat so much, now I'm below home base. And now I'm on the couch and I'm doing nothing and I'm scrolling. So what's so cool about the nervous system is we can start to recognize my state. Ooh, I'm in home base right now. I'm above home base. I'm below home base. So if you're listening to this, we have thrown a lot of information at you. But if you're listening to this and you're like, just check in right now, check in with the amount of energy in your body. If you are still listening to this podcast and you're engaging and you're able to kind of like take in what is being offered to you and in some amount apply it, you're probably in some range somewhere in home base. If you are listening to this while you're doing 10 other things and you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then like tomorrow you are not able to really remember or recall anything because you were trying to do so many things and you've got this huge list, and you've got this and that and that and that, you might be above home base. If you're totally checked out and you probably aren't really able to get any of this information actually into your brain because it's pretty much just turned off. It's why we can easily just keep watching TV after TV show after TV show because we're not really like in this place to take on new information in our brain. So you can just check in right now. Where am I? In general, where do I spend most of my time? And that'll kind of give you clues in terms of, oh, okay, if I spend a lot of time above, I might have this excess energy. So then are there other things I can do to drain my energy? Some people, I mean, for me, I think it's one of the reasons why knowing I spend a lot of time above, I think it's one of the reasons I love exercise so much. I have never been a person who, fortunately, a lot of people who struggle with disordered eating, they end up exercising as a compensatory behavior. I don't really like exercising, but I do it because, I just ate all this food or I don't want to gain weight or whatever it is. And for me, somehow magically, I was able to keep those separate. And I love to exercise, but I think it is one of those ways that I'm able to kind of drain that excess energy. And then what I also figured out in terms of like making sense of things, oh, I used to never let myself rest. I was the first one in the office. I would be one of the last ones there. I would come home, I would do all the things, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go to the gym, and then I'm going to do this. So I literally never let myself slow down. Then I realized, oh, this is my body's way of saying, if you're not going to take a break, I'm going to force it through a binge. So I would realize, oh, binges are a way that my body is actually forcing me to stop because it was the only time that I would just sit on the couch and do nothing. So like then you can kind of start to make sense of your binges, your behavior with food, your struggles with food. They serve a purpose of some sort. They always do. They make sense. So when we can make sense of it, oh, I'm not taking breaks. Oh, these times where I'm not eating enough food, yeah, my body's going to force that too. Oh, and we start to make sense of it. As we make sense, what it does is it highlights the next step on your path. Oh, okay. I got to work more on bringing in more rest. Oh, I've got to work on other ways to drain my energy. Oh, I've got to work on other ways to, expand. If I notice every time an emotion feels big, I go straight for the food. Oh, I've got to work on expanding my emotional capacity. So it highlights the next step on your journey. If you're willing to just with curiosity make sense of it versus thinking you're broken and hopeless and you'll never figure it out.
Jane, no pun intended whatsoever. This episode is a lot to digest. And I feel like this is one for me for sure. It's like the more times I listen to it, because of course I'll listen to it when I edit it and then I listen to it again when it's published. Like it's one of these episodes that I'm going to get more out of each time I listen to it. You have shared an abundance of knowledge and in a way that I think is really going to help people understand what's going on with their eating. I love that you mentioned your podcast, binge eating podcast, Binge Breakthrough. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
binge
Um,
breakthrough. Uh-huh.
they can find a lot more information about this topic of the nervous system for sure, and I'm sure even more. And then you have a book coming out.
I do. Yes. I literally just this week, I got the proof copy of the book. It is called The Binge Eating Breakthrough: Why Food Isn't the Problem and What Really Is. And it really goes into everything that we talked about. So if you're
Hmm.
like, oh my gosh, I loved this episode, I want more, this book will be an amazing resource for you because it literally goes into, it talks about the 8 reasons, the 8 solutions. I've got like 4 pillars of creating peace with food that are talked about in the book. I've got processes like what do you do? What do you do before you eat? What do you do when you are eating and you want to keep eating? There's a part of you that wants to keep eating and a part of you that doesn't. What do you do after you've had a binge? There's really just I really did not hold anything back. Some people write a book, they're like, well, I'm just going to keep just a little bit. And then, maybe if they work with me, then I'll give them everything else. I held nothing back from this book. And it really is, it's the book I wish I had and the resource that I wish I had when I was going through this. And so I'm just excited for anybody who has the opportunity to read the book. And if you have resonated with anything that we've talked about and you're like, ooh, I want more, the podcast is an amazing resource. And the book really is like something you can have in your hands. The other cool thing that I did in the book is there's some downloads, some things that you can get like for yourself, kind of some worksheets and some cues and some of my
Hmm.
processes so that you can have even more for your own toolbox. Like, and
Hmm.
I think that's one of the things that I love doing when I work with people, however I'm working with people, is to give them their own tools, right? It's like the tools that work for me aren't necessarily going to be the same that work for you. The concepts are the same, but really figuring out what is your path? What is your kind of framework? What is your toolbox? Like there's so many different ways that um, that one gets to their journey of peace with food because your peace with food probably looks really different than mine. I know it does. You're a vegan, I'm not, right? So that right there is a different path and that part doesn't matter. What matters is how we feel on the inside when it comes to food and our choices and like that's really what we're all going after is like that internal sense and that feeling when we're around when we're around food. That's what we want.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
I love that you've shared so much here and in your book. And I will for sure be acquiring your book and digging in deeper to just everything that you're putting out into the world. Jane, what would you like to have our listeners walk away thinking about today?
I would say really if your struggle is food, it's not about the food. And it's not about your body or changing your body. So if we can like shift, and I know it's for somebody who has been focused on food and like the size of your body for maybe most of your life, it's a challenging shift. But if you can shift and use the power of your brain to shift to what's going on under the hood, can I just get really curious if maybe just maybe it's true that I'm not broken and that food isn't actually the problem, then what else can I learn? Can I get under the hood? What else can I get curious about? Like that's what I would love for you to take away because what's so amazing about the brain is if you start getting curious about that, your brain will just go to work to find the answers and to find the ways that it actually isn't the food and it isn't about changing the size of your body. It's like these other things, then it's like you open up this entire world that you never even got to see before.
Absolutely. Thank you just so much for your refreshing approach to this complicated topic in the world. Always to stay connected will be in the show notes, along with the links to your amazing podcast and your coaching opportunities and just different ways to be influenced by you in the social worlds. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Food and the complicated relationship most of us have with it can really run deep and often is instilled very early in life. When you think back on your earliest memories that involved stigmas around food or eating, I think we can all realize that the pain and dysfunction around eating really doesn't have anything to do with the actual food. Was this an eye opener for you? Did you have an aha moment in listening to this episode? Food isn't the enemy or something to control or conquer. It's us. It's looking under the hood and finding the problem that will help us stop letting something as simple as food overwhelm us. Thank you, Jane, for this very transparent conversation and all that you shared to help us identify and become aware. Jane's book, podcast, and coaching are all a click away in the show notes. Please remember to subscribe to this podcast and rate and review it. Thanks for the love and support and helping to keep this space going. Until next time.